Good evening, everybody, on this Halloween day. It is almost midnight actually here, so I was considering doing this as a live stream, but it's just late for me, so I'm not going to. I'm going to record it and then put it out. Jennifer Abel has amended her complaint. We now have a second amended complaint. Before we do that, it's obviously it's metadata day as well. So on January 27th, I discovered the metadata in the New York Times article that showed that they had actually been working on this since a year ago today. That was how I kind of fell into reporting on this case. I wasn't intending to. And when I looked for that metadata, it was just by chance. I was looking at in the images, because two other people had found metadata in other parts, and someone mentioned that they hadn't been able to find metadata in the images. So I went and had a look and found it. I had the shock of my life when it was as early as the 31st of October. I was not expecting that. So that's where my start in all of this was. And it's just been kind of snowballing really ever since. But I love it. I do enjoy covering this case. I think it's a really important case to cover, and we have been through so much with it. It's been cited by multiple mainstream media, by Wayfarer in their signal messages, and I've been subpoenaed by Blake Lively for my banking information and location information and all kinds of crap. So I got to file stuff on the docket in response. I have a motion to quash sitting there. I have letters requesting sanctions, protective order. I've become far more involved in this case than I ever expected. It's had its low points, some really low points, but it'd be great to see what I hope will be justice in the end. So, without further ado, we have the second amended complaint. Now, I will say straight off the bat, she does not bring anyone new into it. There's no Van Zandt, no New York Times, no Blake Lively. At the start, we've obviously got several pages of she's answering Stephanie Jones's Stephanie Jones's complaint, which she has to do. So that's the first half. Regulations, jurisdiction. Right. Okay. So yeah, here is the counterclaim. So this is the important bit. Not much has changed. I do think it's been pleaded much better than the last ones. That's my personal opinion. Other people may have different opinions. So that's fine. I personally think that she's done a better job, or should I say, Brian Friedman has done a better job with this one than the previous complaints. We do get some more information as well. Although quite a bit of it is redacted, they redact certain parts, but the bits they don't redact do give you a heads up that there's something juicy there. Okay. So we'll just kind of go straight into it. So, counterclaims of Jennifer Abel. Jennifer Abel, by and through undersigned counsel, as and for her second amended counterclaims against Stephanie Jones and Jones Works, alleges as follows, based on her knowledge as to her own conduct and activities, and on information and belief as to all matters except otherwise alleged. Now, I will just say, she's only amending as far as the. Sorry, bring my laptop closer. She's only amending the ones that were dismissed with prejudice. So that was okay. So defendant Jen Abel is and was at all times relevant an individual residing in Beverly Hills. Stephanie Jones is and was at all times an individual residing in Greenwich, Connecticut. I'm not going to go through all of this because this bit is, this bit is all the same. Jurisdiction and venue, that's the same as before. Okay. I'll start here. Jones Works is a well-known New York-based public relations firm founded by Stephanie Jones, who serves as its CEO. Long known within the public relations industry for her disarming southern twang, brass-knuckle tactics, and high turnover of clients and employees, Stephanie Jones has had a successful career in the entertainment industry. Her firm, Jones Works, has represented at various times Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Jeff Bezos, Lauren Sanchez, Venus Williams, Tom Brady, and Chris Hemsworth. Jones is married to Jason Hodes, a partner at WME, Hollywood's most powerful talent agency. Between her perch atop Jones Works and his partnership at WME, Jones and Hodes are a bona fide Hollywood power couple. When Jones poached Jen Abel, she was an up-and-coming star publicist at R&C-PMK, a storied 70-year-old public relations arm of Interpublic Group. So, and there's a bit about how Jen Abel joined, which I won't go through all of that either. It's largely the same. Right. In connection with and as a condition of her employment, Abel signed a non-disclosure and intellectual property rights and non-solicitation agreement, the 2020 Employment Agreement. Abel was not represented by counsel in connection with the negotiation or execution of the 2020 Employment Agreement. The 2020 Employment Agreement provided that Abel was an at-will employee whose employment was exclusive to Jones' work during the period of her employment. It also contained a confidentiality clause pursuant to which Abel was required to maintain the confidentiality of and not disclose confidential information. As the term is expansively defined therein, provisions purporting to restrict Abel's ability to speak truthfully about her experiences at Jones Works and a host of restrictive covenants, including non-competition and non-solicitation covenants. The 2020 Employment Agreement also contained a California choice of law provision providing that it has been made and shall be interpreted in accordance with the laws of the state of California without regard to conflicts of law principles. Within a few weeks of Abel's onboarding, Jones Works faced a mass exodus of employees in its New York office. While Abel was understandably concerned, Jones assured her that all the departing employees were horrible at their jobs and would be fired regardless. Little did Abel know that the turnover of that magnitude was typical at Jones Works, which routinely faced large-scale departures by disgruntled and demoralized employees. What Abel quickly realized was that morale amongst Jones Works employees was outright abysmal, that such departures were invariably acrimonious, and that departing employees and current employees alike were extremely tight-lipped and fearful of discussing their experience at Jones Works. Abel observed that morale among Jones Works employees was inversely correlated with physical proximity to Jones. Thus, the Los Angeles office was generally a more positive environment than the New York office. Abel was also surprised to learn that despite its size, Jones Works lacked any human resources department or dedicated human resources personnel. Jones instead relied on business affairs personnel and her various chiefs of staff to handle any personnel-related matters. In part, due to the lack of a human resources department or grievance reporting structure and fear of backlash from Jones, Jones Works had a toxic workplace culture in which employees, lacking an outlet or meaningful recourse, constantly gossiped and complained among themselves and leaned on senior employees for solutions to workplace issues. Unlike most workplaces, Jones Works also lacked written internal policies, including regarding the usage of electronic devices or an employee handbook. At no point during Abel's employment did she see, hear about, or sign anything of the sort. The only terms governing Abel's employment were those set forth in her employment agreements. Because public relations jobs require extensive mobile phone usage, public relations firms often assume the cost of their employees' phones and phone usage. Jones Works was no exception. While Abel had an Android, Jones offered to switch her to a Jones Works issued iPhone, which required that she port her existing long-time phone number to the Jones Works company phone plan. Abel had no problem with this so long as she could retain ownership of her phone number and bring it with her should she leave Jones Works. Although Jones Works owned the physical device, it was configured with Abel's personal Apple ID and populated with all of her personal email accounts, photos, text messages, third-party apps, etc. Abel had no concerns about using her Jones Works issued cell phone freely and as her sole mobile device, as such practices are common in her industry, where pay can be low, and neither Jones nor anyone else at Jones Works advised her against doing so. Jones Works did not have any internal policies that prohibited such use, gave it the right to monitor such use, or divested employees of a reasonable expectation of privacy in relation to such use. Thus, Abel had no reason whatsoever to believe that Jones Works' ownership of the physical device would or could in any way compromise her right to privacy in the personal data or accounts stored on or accessible from it. Jones Works would not have any right to access or monitor, for example, her personal email accounts, text messages, photos, or bank accounts. In addition, Abel separately paid for additional storage for her personal data. Notwithstanding the continued large-scale departures from the Jones Works New York office, Abel quickly became a leader of the California operation. Within 2 years, Abel had grown the Los Angeles headcount from 4 employees to 12. All the while, Abel wore an array of hats, working tirelessly without a commensurate increase in compensation. On or about November 22, 2021, Jones Works required Abel to enter into a modified employment agreement, the 2021 employment agreement, changing her employment from at will to a contractual term, adjusting her title and compensation, and subjecting her to a variety of novel restrictions intended to deter her from leaving Jones Works and inhibiting her ability to remain in her chosen field if she were to do so. Abel was not represented by counsel in connection with the negotiation or execution of the 2021 employment agreement. The 2021 employment agreement, like its predecessor, contained an expansively drafted confidentiality provision as well as a host of restrictive covenants, including non-competition and non-solicitation covenants. Unlike the 2020 employment agreement, the 2021 employment agreement contained a New York choice of law provision providing as follows. This agreement and the performance of the parties' obligations hereunder will be governed by and construed in accordance with the laws of the State of New York, without giving effect to any choice of law principles. At all times during Abel's employment at Jones Works, Abel was a resident of the County of Los Angeles, State of California, was based out of Jones Works' Los Angeles office, and performed the overwhelming majority of her work within the state of California. Abel has lived and worked in California for the entirety of her adult life. Since graduating from college, Abel has maintained virtually no connection to the state of New York. She has not lived there, maintained a residence there, performed any significant amount of work there, or even traveled there more than a handful of times. She was, at all times, a California resident and California employee entitled to the protections of the law of the state of California. Apart from infrequent business travel, Abel performed no work for Jones Works in the state of New York. It is clear that Jones Works required Abel to agree to a New York choice of law provision because it wanted the ability to bind her to restrictive covenants such as non-competition and non-solicitation covenants that would be void ab initio in California, and to deprive Abel of the protections of California substantive law. Ab initio is it's a Latin term, and it basically means from the beginning or from the start. By Abel's second year, Jones appeared to be deteriorating. Abel began to harbor increasing concerns about Jones's mental stability and ability to manage client and employee relations. Around this time, Jones started making FaceTime calls to Abel and other employees at notably odd hours. Jones' communications frequently tracked through the night and into the next morning, suggesting that she had not been sleeping at all. Concurrently, and likely relatedly, Jones became noticeably more paranoid and irascible, often accusing Abel and others of plotting against her. It became more challenging to communicate with Jones, settle her nerves, or even track her train of thought. Due to extremely draconian NDAs, Jones's threats and the climate of fear pervading past and present Jones Works employees and clients alike, Jones's worst excesses were largely hidden from view until in or around May 2024, when Puck reported that Sanchez and Johnson had dropped Jones as their publicist. Whilst these were among the most prominent and publicly reported departures, a cascade of Jones Works clients began cutting ties with Jones, especially after word spread that Business Insider was contacting Jones's former and current clients and employees about a forthcoming article about her sordid behavior. On May 8th, 2024, a website called Stephanie Jones Leaks went live, along with a Next.com account, a Facebook page, a Reddit account, and a Pinterest page. These platforms disclosed a litany of alarming allegations about Jones's behavior and business practices, many concerning Jones's mistreatment of Jones Works employees and clients. Abel had no involvement of any kind in Stephanie Jones Leaks. These revelations caused a firestorm in Hollywood, resulting in a surge of negative publicity regarding Jones, including the publication of the Business Insider piece entitled Who's Afraid of Stephanie Jones? Abel was not responsible for the Business Insider piece and learned of it for the first time from Jones herself in or around late May or early June 2024. The Business Insider piece shed more light on the real Jones. Always a volatile personality, Jones had become noticeably more paranoid, erratic, and cruel in recent years. The Business Insider story also shed light on the toxic workplace Jones had fostered at Jones Works. At the office, Jones would regularly turn on deafening music so that she could berate her employees free from scrutiny. I don't think there was one day in the office that someone wasn't crying, said a former employee. Jones also pried into her employees' private lives without invitation. As detailed by Business Insider, when employees called in sick, Jones would FaceTime them to confirm they were actually sick. In at least one instance, an employee who had taken a personal day to attend a funeral received a FaceTime call from Jones during the ceremony. Jones was apparently suspicious of his whereabouts. As discussed above, but disclosed publicly by Business Insider, turnover rates at Jones Works were extraordinary. These departures included not only junior employees, who often left after less than a year, but also senior executives who managed clients' accounts. Jones seldom allowed them to go amicably, often enlisting attorneys to threaten and intimidate them into agreeing not to disparage Jones. In April 2023, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson dropped Jones Works after clashes between Jones and Johnson's team. Jones Works had handled Johnson's personal PR, as well as that of his production company, tequila brand, clothing company, and business partner Danny Garcia. This was a big loss for Jones and one that she kept under wraps from the media in order to leverage opportunities for other clients. In the following months, Jones was also dropped by Bezos, Sanchez, Lainey Wilson, Chris Hemsworth, Wheels Up, Ocean Spray, and Partake Foods. Through it all, Abel remained loyal to Jones, sticking with her through thick and thin, despite growing doubts about Jones's ability to function professionally. By 2024, however, Jones had become increasingly embittered and hostile towards Abel. Jones frequently criticized Abel's management, manifested extreme paranoia about Abel's close relationships with clients and partners, and went out of her way to reprimand, demean, and embarrass Abel in front of junior employees she oversaw. Over time, Abel's concern about Jones's obvious spiral was heightened by the reality that there was no bottom in sight. In the final months of Abel's tenure, Jones had become even more erratic, clearly not sleeping, calling at all hours of the night in a frenzied state, senselessly pitting her own employees against each other, focusing her energy on catching employees in perceived acts of disloyalty, lowering morale still further, and torching her relationships with remaining Jones Works clients. Although Jones had always been volatile, she now appeared to be actively unraveling. Abel was frequently on the receiving end of her often bizarre outbursts. In one instance, Jones announced to Abel's subordinates that she had learned through psychic readings that Abel was an alcoholic and a gambling addict. Even if these statements were true, Jones's public announcement would be, at best, highly inappropriate. Here, however, the accusations are not remotely true. They have literally no basis in reality, and the employees to whom Jones made her pronouncement were well aware of that. While Jones presumably intended to undermine Abel's credibility, she had actually significantly undermined her own. and raised alarm about whether Jones was in the midst of a mental breakdown. On a different occasion, Jones announced again, per her psychic, that Abel would soon be pregnant with twins, humiliating and infuriating Abel, who Jones knew had struggled with fertility issues. Abel was also disgusted by Jones's pattern and practice of creating fake social media accounts to troll former employees and journalists she deemed hostile, including Puck's Matt Baloney. Jones was obsessed with Baloney in particular. Abel also witnessed Jones working with journalists to plant and contribute to negative stories about former Jonesworks clients who had fired Jonesworks. When Abel requested that Jonesworks offer its Los Angeles employees a moderate 2% cost of living rise, Jones, who spent obscene amounts of Jonesworks money on lunches, champagne, and manicures, told her that if that were to happen, it would have to come from Abel's paycheck. Already pushed to the brink, Abel finally had enough when Jones demanded she corroborate falsified accusations about a senior Jonesworks employee in an effort to drive him out. When Abel refused to go along with it, Jones responded with mockery, calling her a 12-year-old drama queen. On or about July 10th, 2024, Abel notified Jones of her departure from Jonesworks. Abel later confirmed her decision on July 26, 2024, and communicated her intention to start her own business. Abel offered a 6-week transition period ending on August 23, 2024, which Jonesworks accepted. On August 7, 2024, Abel contacted Jones's Chief of Staff, Gordon Durran, to coordinate the release of her phone number, as Jones had promised when Abel first joined Jonesworks several years before. Durran agreed, stating, redacted. Jones and Jonesworks knew that Abel had used the same phone number since high school and used the phone for both personal matters and business. She used the phone to exchange personal text messages with friends and family, personal photographs, and confidential financial data. At no point during her tenure did Abel consent to allowing Jonesworks to access, review, or monitor the contents of her phone. Jonesworks did not have a policy in place giving it the right to do so. Abel's willingness to let Jonesworks port her personal cell number to its Verizon phone plan when she joined Jonesworks was predicated on her reasonable expectation that she would retain sole and exclusive access to its contents and her private data and accounts. Had there been any reason to believe otherwise, Abel would not have agreed to the arrangement. In early August 2024, Jones directed Durran to investigate how to gain access to Abel's text messages and call history on her telephone from Jonesworks provider Verizon. Durran was only able to obtain Abel's call and text logs for the prior 6 months. Jones instructed Durran to make sure that Abel could not port her phone number away from the Jonesworks plan without Jonesworks' permission. So that's new information. By mid-August 2024, Jones had hatched a plan to seize Abel's phone outright. She sent Durran to California on August 19th, 2024, and set the plan in motion. On August 21st, 2024, 2 days before Abel's last scheduled day of employment, Durran, a security guard, a forensic data technician employed by Edgeworth Security Services, and an attorney with Frankfurt, Kernick, Klein and Seltz confronted Abel at Jones Works' Beverly Hills office to terminate her Jones Works employment early. Jones had insisted on a security presence so they could redact it. And then it sounds like there's been a deposition of Gordon Durran, because it then says Durran later testified, but that's redacted too. During the August 21st meeting, Durran demanded that Abel hand over her phone and provide her passcode. In a ruse to induce Abel's compliance, Durran falsely claimed that Jones Works needed the passcode to facilitate the release of the phone number and reset the phone. Believing Durran's representations and intimidated by the presence of a large security guard, an attorney, and a forensic data technician, Abel complied with the demands. Abel did not consent to and was not asked to consent to a search of the iPhone's contents. Abel had no reason to believe Jones Works would attempt to access her personal data, or she would not have turned over the device without making prior arrangements to secure it. Abel saw and received express confirmation from Durran and the Jones Works attorney that her phone number would be released immediately thereafter. After handing her iPhone to the Jones Works attorney, Abel was escorted out of the office by the security guard. Abel went directly to a nearby Verizon store and called Durran with the Verizon representative to coordinate the transfer of her phone number. Durran told Abel that Jones Works had commenced the transfer and would call back. After 4 hours of waiting, Abel left the Verizon store in panic and despair. She never heard from him again. Jones Works never released the phone number. Through their promise to release Abel's number upon her August 2023 departure, Jones Works had lulled Abel into a false sense of security. Believing she had 2 days remaining, Abel had not taken any steps to remove her personal data and information from the iPhone. When she arrived at the office on August 21st, she did so with a fully loaded personal iPhone logged into all of her accounts, registered to her iCloud, and containing all of her photos, text messages, and emails. By refusing to release Abel's phone number, Jones Works usurped Abel's digital identity and cut off her access to critical accounts protected by two-factor authentication. As a result, Abel lost access to bank accounts, utilities, insurance, and virtually every other sensitive account. In effect, Jones had orchestrated a wholesale theft of Abel's phone number and personal data. It took months of endless phone calls and in-person visits for Abel to regain access to her checking and saving accounts, credit cards, investment and retirement accounts, as well as her internet, gas, and electricity accounts. In fact, Abel still does not have access to her Empower 401k account. She also lost 20 years of contacts, including those of her old friends, former clients, and colleagues, and extended family. Abel had to reset all her airline loyalty, rideshare, and food delivery accounts. And for each social media account, Abel had to go through an arduous identity verification process. In short, it was a nightmare. By contrast, Jones gained unrestricted access to everything stored on Abel's phone: her text messages, emails, and personal photos. Jones could read her communications with her fiancé, parents, friends, everyone. To ensure she would retain Abel's data under any eventuality, redacted. The next day, using her new phone number, Abel begged Duran and Jones to relent. So I'm not going to read the text messages that are in here because they are the same ones. After usurping control of Abel's private communications, Jones began exploiting them to harm Abel further. Specifically, Jones scoured Abel's text messages to find instances where Abel had privately been critical of or gossiped about any former Jones Works colleagues and shared them with those individuals and others. As a result, Abel saw long-term professional and personal relationships fracture. Jones Works senior executives were positively gleeful as they watched Abel's closest colleagues turn against her. Among the communications reviewed, discussed, and disseminated by Jones and her cohorts were highly intimate messages between Abel and her friends about their sex lives. Redacted. This exchange, along with many others of a similar personal nature, are no longer in the exclusive possession, custody, and control of Abel and those she intended to communicate with, as they should have remained. Instead, they were widely distributed by Jones to her team, to Lively, to the press, and to untold others, and ultimately Bates stamped and captured for posterity in this and the related litigation. Also stolen by Jones were Abel's communications with her long-term partner and fiancé, as well as her parents. These include discussions between Abel and her fiancé about Abel's fertility, and between Abel and her parents about her mother's serious health challenges. Some of these messages, which Abel does not even have due to the theft of her phone number, were produced by Jones Works in this litigation. So messages that even Jan Abel herself has not seen they've been produced in the litigation by Jones Works. That's terrible. That's so awful. That is absolutely awful. Reams of other sensitive messages were excluded from Jones Works document production, but clearly are, or at least were, in Jones's possession. This cannot be reasonably disputed, given that Jones directed her digital forensics team to copy Abel's phone in its entirety, which they did. Based on the evidence thus far in this case, Jones closely, even maniacally, inspected these materials. In so doing, Jones attained unvarnished visibility into the most sensitive and private aspects of Abel's life: her fertility struggles, her fiancé's father's neurological decline, and her financial situation. Jones also obtained all of Abel's personal photos, which run the gamut in subject matter, but were almost invariably not intended for the consumption of Jones, Lively, or any other hostile actors. Not only did Jones steal communications of a personal nature, but she also stole privileged communications between Abel and Jessup regarding Abel's new business. Jones did so knowing full well that Jessup was Abel's attorney. Redacted. In sum, Abel was subjected to a boundless and disgraceful invasion of her privacy by Jones and Jones Works. She has been left aghast and humiliated and terrified. Having torched Abel's privacy and dignity, Jones started boasting internally that Abel's business would not last long. I'm going to read that sentence again. Having torched Abel's privacy and dignity, Jones started boasting internally that Abel's business would not last long. For almost 4 years, Abel largely managed Jones Works' work for Wayfarer Studios and Justin Baldoni out of its Los Angeles office. Over time, Abel developed a close, trusting relationship with Baldoni, Wayfarer CEO Jamie Heath and the rest of the Wayfarer team, particularly as their strategic communications needs around It Ends With Us became increasingly complex. At all times during Wayfarer's 4-year engagement with JonesWorks, Abel was the point person on the account. It was very clear to Wayfarer, and Jones largely did not hide, that Jones considered them to be a lower prestige client and devoted her attention to clients such as Jeff Bezos and Tom Brady. JonesWorks was in utter turmoil by July 2024. Already bleeding clients and personnel, Jones learned that Business Insider was working on an unflattering story about her set to be published sometime in August. Jones felt that her reputation had been severely damaged by the Stephanie Jones Leaks website and social media accounts. Jones was desperate to keep her remaining clients. At the time, Wayfarer and Baldoni were in the midst of a massive PR crisis as news stories began to trickle out speculating about possible tension between Lively and Baldoni, mainly due to the cast no longer following him on social media. Just as the film was about to premiere, Jones started participating in meetings, calls, and written correspondence to reassert her authority over the account and convey her engagement to Wayfarer. Wayfarer and Baldoni asked Abel to recommend a crisis management specialist. After consulting with Jones, who had no viable ideas, Abel recommended 3 firms to help navigate these choppy waters, one of which was Melissa Nathan's The Agency Group PR. Abel had particular confidence in Nathan as they had worked together extensively in connection with a different JonesWorks client. The need for crisis PR expertise was particularly acute due to Lively's demand that Baldoni not be permitted to attend the premiere and the threat that Baldoni would be excluded from the press junket with the rest of the cast. Abel learned during her initial discussion with Nathan that, per her media contacts, a negative story was already being shopped around to multiple outlets, positioning Baldoni's religion as a cult and accusing Baldoni of having fat-shamed Lively after he asked her personal trainer in private about her weight due to his history of severe back pain. Even though Abel felt strongly that Nathan was the right choice, she knew that Jones would be unhappy with the recommendation. Jones viewed Nathan as a competitor and had a history of bad-mouthing her to anyone who would listen, including to Nathan's own clients. Out of sensitivity to these considerations, Abel advised the Wayfarer team to remain open to other possible options and to decide after meeting Nathan themselves. Abel feared backlash from Jones but felt strongly that Nathan was the best option. When Jones learned that Wayfarer was considering retaining Nathan, she was furious and immediately lashed out at Abel, pressuring her to disparage Nathan as a demonstration of loyalty to Jones. After initially pushing back, Abel eventually relented after Jones called her, crying and screaming, and engaged in some light disparagement of Nathan to placate Jones. Jones then attempted to derail the engagement and exploited confidential client information to dissuade Wayfarer from moving forward with Nathan. While Heath, Wayfarer's CEO, acknowledged Jones's position, he told her Wayfarer would make its own decision after meeting Nathan. Jones inserted herself into the mix in early August 2024, seeking to box out Nathan and Abel. The problem, however, was that Jones had chosen not to pay attention to Wayfarer's leadership's communication strategy or internal decision-making, having long claimed to be too busy with higher-profile clients. Wayfarer was fine with Jones's disengagement as Abel was their trusted advisor, and they had no interest in being a pawn in JonesWorks' office politics. In addition, Jones chose to take a lengthy vacation in Europe during this critical period of the press campaign and premiere of the film. Even from afar, Jones's efforts were ham-fisted, unwelcome, and sporadic given her distance from Wayfarer's day-to-day business. As Jones tried to stir up drama and undermine Abel's authority, Wayfarer and Baldoni focused solely on managing the crisis at hand. Notwithstanding Jones' general disengagement, it is not true that she was kept in the dark. To the extent she was out of the loop, it was by choice. Jones was copied on virtually all communications during this period and was privy to Wayfarer's predicament and its chosen strategy of non-confrontation. Had there been a smear campaign, as was later alleged by her and the Lively parties, Jones would have undoubtedly have known about it in real time. Redacted admitted Jones in an email on August 21st, 2024. At the time, Lively and Baldoni's teams had negotiated an uneasy truce in which neither side would participate in negative coverage of the other. Lively's team had already broken that truce, but the Wayfarer team did not know that then. As far as they were concerned, it was best for Baldoni, Lively, and the film if both sides agreed to keep the peace, though Wayfarer's team had to date been acting only defensively in responding to press inquiries. But on August 8, 2024, Jones, in another attempt to reinsert herself, contacted a Daily Mail reporter about a story they had published about Baldoni and Lively. She did so in direct violation of Wayfarer's instruction not to talk to the press, given the truce with Lively's team. Nonetheless, Jones bragged to Wayfarer about trading calls with the Daily Mail in an effort to appear engaged on the account. Nathan and Abel were left to deal with the fallout. This blatant disregard of Wayfarer's strategy sparked a chain of unfortunate developments. Sloane and Sony learned that purportedly someone from Baldoni's team had been communicating negatively to media. Redacted. When Wayfarer's leadership found out, they were livid, as was Sony. All parties were desperate to prevent an all-out slugfest between Lively and Baldoni just as the film was about to be released to the world. With her reckless and unauthorized activities, Jones had made that scenario much more likely. In response, Wayfarer instructed Jones to cease all activities on its and Baldoni's behalf for the time being and to let Abel and another Los Angeles-based Jones Work employee, Matthew Mitchell, handle the crisis alongside Nathan. You may be able to hear the rain hitting the windows in the background. Sorry about that. At this time, Nathan started hearing from other journalists that Sloane was planting negative stories about Baldoni and was under the impression that Baldoni's camp had broken the truce. Anxious Sony executives began reaching out to Wayfarer seeking clarity. Yet Jones, panicked about being blamed, refused to be sidelined, insisting that she needed to contact Sony's and Lively's PR teams to clarify that she had not planted any negative stories about Lively. Heath told her not to do that, to which Jones responded that she could do whatever she wants to clear her name and that Wayfarer could not stop her from making calls. Desperate to salvage her reputation with Lively and Sony, Jones emailed several key Sony executives working on the film to declare that she was in Europe with her husband, partner at WME, Jason Hodes, and to place all the blame on her team. In her attempt to save face, Jones ruptured her relationship with Wayfarer and Baldoni. Although Jones ultimately agreed to stand down, Wayfarer and Baldoni expressed that they had lost all trust in her. After parachuting in for self-interested reasons, nearly blowing up the truce with Lively's team and lashing out when told to stop, Jones became a magnet for drama when it was least needed. As September drew near, Wayfarer and Baldoni, with the assistance of Abel and Nathan, continued their tireless efforts to promote the film, put out fires, and see the project through to the finish line. Stewed in jealousy towards Abel and resentment towards Wayfarer Baldoni, Jones clearly saw the writing on the wall. Knowing that she would soon be terminated, Jones started taking steps transparently intended to make it harder to cut her loose. Those steps included sending email after unwelcome email to Heath and others, long after their relationship had irrevocably ruptured, to lay the groundwork to contest that she had been detached and non-responsive for years. This was especially galling as Jones had been in Europe and largely incommunicado, save for a few texts of support to Baldoni prior to the premiere, and then her disastrous efforts at self-preservation for weeks during the critical month of August when the film premiered. In contrast with Abel, who was loyal, trusted, and even-tempered while working around the clock through the crisis, Jones was a walking disaster whose self-absorption, disloyalty, and insubordination had become a significant headache. Rather than accept the end of the Wayfarer relationship with professionalism and decorum, Jones started threatening to sue, demanding exorbitant payment for work not done, and protesting that she had done an amazing job. Jones stewed in resentment and indignity, unable to bear the loss of another Joneswork client. She set out to take revenge on Abel, Wayfarer, Baldoni, and Nathan. Jones disclosed at least some of Abel's private communications to the Lively parties no later than August 21st, 2024. Sloan, Lively's publicist, confirmed as much to Nathan on a phone call that evening. Despite lacking Abel's consent to access, review, or disseminate those communications, Jones and Jonesworks were able to do so without difficulty because the iPhone in hand, they could bypass the password protection that would otherwise bar their access. On or about August 24th, 2024, Jones took things a step further and attempted to contact Lively directly through a mutual connection, redacted. So this is new information, and this is interesting information. Wayfarer clearly got more information about what happened from, between Abel being terminated to, probably the CRD being filed. A few days later, Jones reached out again to Redacted, then contacted Jones and Lively directly. In advance of the call, Redacted. Reeling from a storm of negative publicity, Lively instructed Redacted. Lively and Jones spoke by phone approximately a week later. Then there's more redactions. A few days later, Lively followed up with Redacted. I can't wait for this to become unsealed. I so badly want to know what has been redacted. However, it is now well known that Jones transmitted the contents of Abel's iPhone to Lively, who in turn disseminated them more widely, including to the New York Times. While the contents of Abel's communications do not support the existence of an untraceable smear campaign, they do show that by the time of the film's premiere, Abel and others in Wayfarer's circle held Lively in deep disdain and vented acerbically, I can't say that, amongst themselves. These sentiments were the natural result of the Wayfarer party's first-hand knowledge of Lively's vicious behaviour and malignant persona and the high-stress situation in which they found themselves. In turning over these materials to Lively, Jones knew full well they would be used. With slicing, dicing, cherry-picking, messaging, and in some cases outright alteration, the Lively parties exploited Abel's text messages to great effect. Joining forces with the New York Times, the Lively parties commissioned the hit. However, for different reasons, the Lively parties, on the one hand, and Jones Works, on the other hand, needed to create a veneer of legitimacy. The Lively parties likely anticipated or were told directly that the New York Times would not traffic in stolen communications under these circumstances and needed the colour of law. Jones Works, for their part, wanted to insulate themselves from legal exposure to Wayfarer for breaches of confidentiality. Accordingly, on September 27, 2024, working hand in glove with Jones Works, the Lively parties and their counsel at Manat initiated a sham legal proceeding in New York State Court. And they're obviously referring to Van Zandt. The sham lawsuit was nothing more than a transparent ploy to obtain subpoena power. The plaintiff, Van Zandt, is a corporate entity affiliated with Lively and Reynolds and entirely unrelated to the film or the Wayfarer parties. The lawsuit asserted 3 causes of action: breach of contract, breach of the implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing, and faithless servant against Doe defendants only. It does not explain how or why Van Zandt was unable to identify the proper defendants, which is especially notable in the context of a breach of contract action. Instead, Van Zandt, who are obviously Lively and Reynolds, and Manat implausibly claim not to be privy to the identities of its own contractual counterparties or its own employees, contractors, agents, or representatives. The lawsuit is devoid of specific allegations against anyone, much less Abel, and relies exclusively on boilerplate legal jargon. Notably, Van Zandt never requested the assignment of a judge, substituted the Doe defendants for named parties, or served the complaint on any defendant. The only docket entries are the complaint and a notice of dismissal filed on December 19, 2024, the day before Lively filed her CRD complaint against the Wayfarer parties. The same day the lawsuit was filed, September 27, 2024, Jones warned a departing employee not to work for Abel because her business wouldn't be around much longer. Also on September 27, 2024, was the launch of Empire Waste, Claire Ayoub's film that Wayfarer produced and financed. Once the lawsuit was filed, the Lively parties used it to issue a subpoena to Jones Work for the data stored on Abel's phone, including troves of private emails and text messages picked up via the application of highly generic search terms. The information turned over to Lively included communications that were plainly protected by the attorney-client privilege. Since there were no identifiable parties and no party had been served, the subpoenas were issued without notice, depriving Abel of any knowledge of the subpoena, much less the opportunity to object. Abel is informed and believes, and based thereon alleges, that the sham lawsuit was contrived by the Lively parties and Jones, acting in concert to facilitate and cover up Jones's release of the data extracted from Abel's phone and personal accounts under the guise of legal process, without risking detection by interested parties such as Abel, who could have intervened to stop the flagrant abuse of process. But there's a lot more detail about all this now, and it feels like they are kind of pleading the allegations against Van Zandt. Although they haven't named Van Zandt, it feels like they are setting up for future motions on this. As planned by the parties upon receipt of the sham subpoena on or about October 1st, 2024, Jones and Jones Works blithely surrendered the entire contents of Abel's iPhone communications for a second time, creating a veneer of legitimacy and affording Jones and Jones Works plausible deniability once the New York Times came through for libel. Mia, shh. It is on this pretext that Jones and Jones Works counsel later described responding to a court-ordered subpoena. As a result of Jones's malicious scheme, Abel's life has been turned upside down. Her career and reputation have been destroyed, her private information leaked, and her email inbox and social media pages filled with a daily stream of death threats and abuse. She has watched her client list evaporate and the viability of her once promising business cast into doubt. Abel lost control of her long-time phone number and along with it access to her most sensitive accounts and decades worth of contacts. Only after months of chaos and hundreds of calls with untold numbers of customer support representatives did Abel restore some semblance of order in her life. The backlash against Wayfarer and Baldoni has been equally devastating, with Baldoni wrongfully labelled as a sex pest, his accolades rescinded, and his future projects thrown into doubt. An unimaginable invasion of Abel's privacy and dignity, Jones possesses and controls the full contents of Abel's iPhone, including her text messages, emails, and photos. Abel lives in fear of what is to come, given the vast troves of personal data in the possession of this hostile and vengeful actor. As a result of Jones and Jones Works' torturous conduct, Abel has suffered enormous harm to her personal and professional life. All of this harm has accrued in the state of California, where Abel lives and works. And then we've got the causes of action, so I'll just read what they are, but I won't read the detail. So the first cause of action is violations of California Penal Code, Section 502. That is knowingly accessing, without permission, obtaining, altering, disseminating, otherwise using Abel's data, computer system, computer network, etc., etc. Knowingly and without permission accessing and causing to be accessed, taken and causing to be taken, copying and causing to be copied, using and causing to be used computer services, namely Abel's personal Gmail account, the email account maintained by RWA Communications, that's Abel's business, and her iCloud data, including her text messages and photos. We have then a second cause of action, which is conversion. So that's the fact that she didn't get the phone number back. Basically, Abel did not consent to Jones Works' conversion of the number. And basically, conversion is the fact that Jones has substantially interfered with Abel's ownership and or possessory interest in the phone number by knowingly or intentionally taking possession of it and refusing to release it back to Abel after she demanded its return. The third cause of action is promissory fraud. And that is for Gordon Durran's promise on the 21st of August that if she gave up the Jones Works issued iPhone and provided a passcode, that Jones Works would release her number and ensure she had exclusive access to the private data stored on and the accounts accessible from the iPhone. Obviously, Abel relied on this promise and upheld her end of the bargaining, gave the phone and the passcode, and Jones Works reneged. So that is what that promissory fraud is referring to. And that is it. That is the 3 courses of actions that they have chosen to refile. I haven't had time to compare to the first amended complaint because, like I say, it's when I started this, it was nearly midnight. It's now nearly 1 o'clock in the morning. But I will probably look at the both and see what differences there are, and then do a much shorter video just to kind of summarize, key changes in this. Okay, well, have a great evening, and you will hear from me tomorrow.